Today we're going to go over what exactly is an arrowhead. Here we have several dart tips, several arrowheads, and 4 knife blades. And all of these pieces represent the northern Ohio Valley where I'm located. Now the general term you'll hear everybody call all of these are arrowheads. Here on the top row we have the dart tips, ranging from up to 10,000 years old to 3,000 years old, all the way down to 1,500 years old. And these would have not been on an arrow. These would have been on a dart thrown with an atlatl, as seen here. And you can see just how large these points were that were affixed to darts thrown with that atlatl. Dart shafts were a lot longer, a little bit thicker, and a lot heavier. And they didn't have the speed that an arrow has, but they could penetrate just with that weight. And this technology was used for thousands of years before the bow showed up here in the Ohio Valley. Now, evidence of the bow and arrow has been found earliest in the North Arctic, around the area we know of Alaska now, around 3000 BC or 5,000 years ago. But it didn't show up in what we now know as the continental United States in the Rocky Mountains around the year 200. So that was a long time afterwards. And over the next few hundred years, it slowly made its way across the plains into the Ohio Valley around the year 700. And that would have been right in the range, or in the middle, of when these Jack's Reef projectiles were made. And I want to show you something about these Jack's Reefs. And these Jack's Reef points would have been shot on a dart with an atlatl until the bow showed up. These early ones are a little bit thicker, a little bit larger. And I figure when the bow showed up that they tried to put one of these heavier points on an arrow, but it just didn't work well because it was just too heavy. And arrows need speed. That's what they depend on, speed and not force like a dart. But they always thought from using before that they needed a large point to cut a big hole to kill an animal. So the first thing that was tried, they tried to thin them down, make them really, really thin and light. But they still kept a little larger projectile on an arrow. So right in here would have been the transitional period from the atlatl to the bow and arrow. And over time, these notch points, these arrow tips or arrowheads, got smaller and smaller until they realized they didn't even have to put notches on the point, is when they started making these triangle tips right here. So actually, the only arrowheads on this table are right here. The only true arrowheads. And maybe these two in the transitional period. And it's surprising to know that the bow and arrow was only in use in the Ohio Valley for around 800 years before the Europeans showed up. And some of these triangles can be dated all the way up into the 1600s, before the natives got their hands on metal and then started making them out of metal. Thanks for listening, and you come back now.